So first, I guess just introduce yourself and talk a bit about your healing practice and about who you are as a healer and yeah, basically how long you've been doing this and the history of your involvement in it.
Thank you. I'm Eddy, and my work is as a somatic movement therapist, which is basically a new field. It's based on work that's been circulating for about 100 years, but the evolution of the profession really began in the 1980s, and I was at the early end of that with my own training program being brought in to this field, which was actually the first to be called somatic movement therapy training. Now there are so many of these types of trainings that I had to give mine a name, and it's called dynamic embodiment.
Should I lay down?
So what's your impulse in terms of just having a sense of exhaustion in your heart?
My impulse is to lay down.
Please do. So in a dynamic embodiment session, people might come for anything. It might be because they're an actor or a dancer that wants to perform with more force, more elocution, more dynamism, more calmness, whatever it might be. Or they may be coming because they're in back pain, or they may come because they're an infant that had a birth trauma, or they may come, like many of the people that I work with in my program Moving for Life, because they've been going through cancer and want to support their body in kind of realigning but also regaining its vitality through movement. And the work includes table work, movement work in space or on the floor, in space meaning walking or traveling in some way, and talking. So we do sort of dialogue about what's going on in one's psyche, in one's life, in one's lifestyle that can support this reconnection to vitality. So that's one of the first things is like, what do you want?
Yeah.
It's really not my job to say what you will fit best at or in or what position. It's me asking you, what is your body saying to you? With somatic work, the whole point is to get in touch with your own body's resources for healing. So the soma means the living body, and the idea is that we're not just kind of being treated like a body, a commodity, but rather that we're getting in touch with all of the capacities within the physical body for self-healing. So how's this feeling?
Well, as soon as you put your hand down, it was like very calming, which I'm hearing you say that word a lot, like calming, and I don't know, what showed up for me right away was like, oh, this feels a little bit like having just cried a lot and being held and feeling like almost like a wholeness in my chest, and then having right away a question come up like, is this how my heart is supposed to feel? What is the way that my heart is supposed to feel? Which is the way, sometimes.
For instance, a parent may come, or a set of parents may come with a child. And so in that case, we might just watch how the child's moving on the floor. And then I might be in dialogue with the parents about why they brought the child here. And then I might point out something that I'm noticing about what the child does really well, but then also what seems like it could be more supported. And then with the parents' permission, I would come in with my hands to help demonstrate what that work is. So that would be kind of what we call neurological repatterning or neurodevelopmental repatterning with a little person. I'm moving in closer to your heart. How's that feel?
Good.
Yeah. So just to say, this is your thymus, and your thymus is really important as a protector, as the heart of the immune system, where we fight off bacteria and bad things. So just to bring awareness to this area and power, energy, is a way to kind of go, okay, I can handle the situation. And I have another cool story for someone who was probably more in his 50s, whereby he was getting to be a public speaker in his business, but he was actually an introvert. And so he wanted to just feel better as a public speaker and was sharing some of the skills he had developed in his field of expertise. And as we got working, stories will come out. So that's the other thing that happens, is people tell more about their life stories. And what came out in his case was that his parents were Holocaust survivors. And they had always told him not to raise his hand at school, not to be big in his voice, always to recede, just hide. Basically, the theme was the way to survive is to hide. So they were kind of replicating a generational issue. And so we worked on him kicking things as he was speaking, throwing things, talking, getting louder. You know, in the freedom of a movement therapy session, there's this room to explore, to be creative. And he did report back that he was able to project more of his voice after sort of clearing some of those, both the stories themselves and the habits of what I'll call retention, of holding back. Yeah.
It's just, I mean, protection. Is,
Like, I want more, or, you
like,
know.
I want more and more and more and more.
Okay,
More.
great. So that's really nice to acknowledge. It's like, okay, I want more protection.
Yeah.
And actually, you can do this for yourself with self-touch, you know, just having your own hands on your thymus and asking for other people to hug your thymus. So what I'm saying is there's no reason that allied medical professionals, including licensed mental health workers, couldn't use a somatic approach. And I'm glad to say that there is a whole field called somatic psychology. Within our field of somatic movement therapy, we're given the mandate to really work with the whole person physically, emotionally, kind of psychically a little bit, and certainly mentally in the sense of, you know, what's going on in your mind. So we're talking about touch, we're talking about movement, we're talking about bringing awareness to the body, we're talking about listening to body cues. And ideally, physical therapists will do more somatic work with educating people about their whole body and integration. Licensed mental health workers will do more somatic psychology within their clinical work. And even nutritionists probably should understand movement as well. The activity that we relate to the thymus is the reaching of your two hands out into space. So, for instance, if you were to feel your fingertips even just sliding towards me, you might feel how that's a little bit of a tug into that upper chest region. It's what we call the symmetrical or homologous reach of the arms and the hands of the upper body. So speaking of somatic movement work, again, it can be called education or therapy. We do that because it's always educational. The process is educational, and it often has a therapeutic outcome. But we're not doing psychotherapy. So that's a big difference from going to a dance movement therapist or a somatic psychologist, in which case they might do some more typical kind of what we might call attachment work, really working on early childhood, family dynamics, going into the past. In our work, or in my work with dynamic embodiment, we're staying in the present. And we're treating an adult as an adult, not kind of regressing, but really, and not really establishing a relationship of transference, countertransference, where there's this healing that happens because you get to be reparented. In our case, we kind of cut that cord quite often, and we say, what do you want to do with this information now? How do you want to use it? How are you feeling right now? What is this work feeling like to you? So we're constantly bringing it back to the present and educating. And so with that in mind, yes, a somatic movement educator, somatic movement therapist can do a lot, because we can go into, you know, why is it that you have fear as you're tackling that particular movement? Why is it that you tremor sometimes? Why is it that you have butterflies in your stomach, not just going on the stage or in front of 3,000 people, but just coming to work every day? And so we can go into some touch work with calming the organ system down, calming the nervous system down throughout the whole body, even into the nerves of the arms and legs. we can help give resources that are very physical for grounding and for a sense of joy. So some of the exercises are more about just like concrete, I need to calm the body. Others are more about reconnecting with a sense of power, as I've been talking about, or happiness. And so dance actually is really terrific for that too. But the idea, and you can just picture it or imagine it, or imagine it for later in some other situation. It's of a child or yourself or the child within you reaching for a hug.
What had you go into this kind of work personally?
Okay, great. So my journey with learning somatic movement work was, first of all, before the term existed, and it was basically various dancers that I've been studying with that were curious about the body and curious about human movement and curious about how to talk about it. So this lava movement analysis began in the 50s, 60s. It really began in the teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, and became known in America later in the 30s and 40s. Or they wanted to know more about anatomy and physiology and kinesiology, which is a fairly new field, but the study of human movement. And so as a dancer, I was just exposed to some of these more cutting edge approaches to caring about the body and also facilitating greater range of motion, more balance, all the things dancers want. And so the experience of doing somatic work has actually been pretty much serendipitous. It's been synchronous. It's been being in the right place at the right time. It's being fed with what my soul needed. It's been the opportunity to keep dancing, but also really quench my thirst for knowledge. And I have to say I love my colleagues. The holistic model is very deep, and it goes deep into all of those areas. Lots of mental inquiry, lots of spiritual reflection, lots of creative output, and lots of physical wisdom. So it's a lot of fun. Yeah. So how does your heart feel when you sing? Have you ever been aware of it at the same time?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it depends. Like when I'm performing in front of an audience, sometimes it feels like
where you kind of push with your symmetrical arm connection through your heart. Yeah. And you feel your wrists into your heart. And then maybe on your thighs, just like on your own body. Yeah. And so there's that idea that your thymus can rest on the heart.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
So to come here is almost like my heart, and I shared this a little bit, like my heart before working with Martha was felt exhausted. And in working with Martha, what I discovered was that it was almost actually more my thymus above my heart than my actual heart. Like my heart actually feels okay, but my thymus, which is like a protective gland, is what is actually has the most discomfort going on in it. And just paying attention to that brought a lot of soothing, calm. I feel more of a presence in that part of my body and my emotional body than I typically ever do. We're just right now. So I'm walking away from it feeling like fuller. I feel very calm.
I have sort of just been thinking a lot about the body and what the body goes through when it's having an illness, or the types of fears that come up from being afraid that you'll lose someone that you love. And so just seeing Ash hold her heart and her thymus and kind of working through that was also helpful for me, even though I wasn't the one on the table.
That just was so safe and attentive and comprehensive. I'm really moved.
And so I think that it's just very important for me also to remember to come back into my body and to take care of myself and do the smallest actions that make me feel calm.
So yeah, really, really interesting.